Broadway Bank, in partnership with the San Antonio Food Bank, have started their Summer Snacks for Kids campaign, providing children in low-income households with nutritious food that they lose access to during the summer. All donations go directly toward buying nutritious snacks for kids in need. Details are at broadway.bank/snacks.
Welcome to Fronteras, a program that explores issues at the border and beyond through the lens of arts, culture, and history. I'm Norma Martinez with Texas Public Radio in San Antonio. San Antonio has a deep connection to Mexican-American civil rights history, from the pecan shellers' strike of 1938 to the Mexican-American Youth Organization to the Edgewood school walkouts, to name a few. The San Antonio-based Mexican-American Civil Rights Institute, MACRI, preserves, celebrates, and educates about this history with research, exhibits, online conversations, and yearly symposiums. We're talking today with MACRI's Executive Director, Sarah Zenaida Gould, who tells us more about the history and mission of the organization.
MACRI was founded in 2019. This was in the wake of a couple of major 50th anniversary commemorations that we had in San Antonio. One to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights hearings that were held here and that were so important in bringing national, federal attention to Mexican-American civil rights issues, and then also the 50th anniversary of the Edgewood school walkouts. So we had a couple of symposia about those two events, at which people who were involved in those events spoke about their experiences and how it shaped their lives. And some of us were contemplating afterwards that those folks most likely would not be with us at the next major anniversary. And how would we continue to make the public aware that San Antonio has been the crossroads of so much Mexican-American civil rights work and activism, but also that there is still so much more civil rights work to be done, and that by doing that work, we are carrying forward the legacy of all these other people on whose shoulders we stand, right? So we came up with a kind of a loose idea and managed to get seed funding in the fall of 2019 from the city of San Antonio, for which we are very grateful. That's how we really came into existence. And then, of course, a few months later, the pandemic hit. So in August of 2020, we held what we called our virtual launch. That was really setting the stage for what we now call our annual symposium. So that was a half-day event, essentially introducing ourselves, but also introducing the idea of what a Mexican-American Civil Rights Institute could do in terms of collecting and preserving Mexican-American civil rights history, but also what are some of the ongoing challenges that we can see this thread connecting the present to the past. After that, it really grew, and it moved into a 2-day event. 1 year in 2023, when we were commemorating the release of the Jovita Hidar Quarter, we partnered with the U.S. Mint and the Smithsonian, and that actually turned into a 3-day event. We're back to the 2-day event. It was fun, but it was a lot. And so we define civil rights very broadly because we are essentially trying to build bridges to people who maybe think, civil rights, that's not really my jam. But we want everybody to know civil rights is everybody's jam, whether you want it to be or not. You're impacted by civil rights. But also, we don't want civil rights to always be something super heavy. So we try to find a balance. You'll see this in our programming. We try to not only talk about things like what's happening historically with voting rights and how does that impact our understanding of voting rights today, but also what's going on with things like representation of Mexican Americans and Latinos in the media, on small screens, on big screens, on the radio. Where are our voices being heard? Where are our voices not being heard? How can your voice be heard? So we're trying to connect a lot of dots and make people feel empowered by this history of people who have dedicated themselves to expanding civil rights, but also to see that we each can play a role in continuing that legacy today.
And what I think has been really beautiful about seeing how MACRI has evolved over the years is you almost took some lessons from the pandemic and you're still applying them today, because during the pandemic there was no way for people to gather in person. So you started hosting these conversations online, and you continue to do so. You have those frequently throughout the year. Also, the MACRI Visitor Center here close to downtown San Antonio, you have ongoing exhibits that are related to many important civil rights court cases. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that as well?
Absolutely. So we did the virtual launch in August of 2020, and from there we started doing monthly or so virtual talks with scholars around the country about some topic in Mexican-American civil rights history. And what we realized is that people were watching these from all over the place. So we had about half of the audience from the San Antonio area, but half was from all over the Southwest. We get a good group of people who watch from the D.C. metro area. We get people from the Pacific Northwest, like Washington State, Chicago. People also wanted to gather again as the pandemic started to slow down. And so we started looking for a place where we could establish what we call a visitor center. So we did set that up just west of downtown in the historic west side of San Antonio. We are able to do in-person things there. But people reached out to us and said, please don't stop doing the virtual events. I'm watching from Maryland or wherever they were. And so we do still do that once a month, but we also are able to do in-person things at the Visitor Center, as well as collaborate with other folks. We love to collaborate with the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, the Public Library, go and take these things to other audiences and expand who has reach to these things. And we try very hard to keep all of our events free because we just feel like educating the public is something that should be free. In doing that, we've been able to bring forth traveling exhibits that we create to debut at the Visitor Center that focus on civil rights trailblazers who maybe are underknown. The very first one we did was on Alonso Perales, and that's somebody who really just made such a huge difference in his lifetime, and yet he isn't very well remembered, unfortunately. So we did a traveling exhibit on him. Last year we did one on Dolores Huerta for her 95th birthday, and that one we were able to engage local students. And so many of them wrote about how Dolores Huerta meant something personally to them, to their family, and that she was somebody that they held up as an important person in their lives. So we also do exhibits on court cases. We want people to know that civil rights don't just happen. It requires people like an Alonso Perales, like a Dolores Huerta, to push change forward, but it also often requires actual policy work. And a lot of policy work does happen through court actions or legal actions. So we've been trying to shed some light on some critical court cases that we would love for people to just know, oh, that's where that right comes from. So we did an exhibit, opened late last year, on Cisneros versus Corpus Christi ISD, which was a really important court case in 1970 that extended Brown versus Board of Education, which is a 1954 court case, to Mexican Americans. But it took a while, from 1954 to 1970. That is often how the legal system works, and that's something we should also be aware of. Policy change does not happen overnight. Our current exhibit is about 3 different court cases that all involve Mexican Americans or Mexican perceived individuals and due process of the law. And then our next exhibit will be opening in July, and it's sort of a big picture overview, snapshot of different ways that Mexican Americans have been contributing to the vision of democracy that we carry here in this country for the last 250 years. So that's our contribution to the America 250 commemoration. But we love to do those exhibits, and what we've been doing is we've been creating them to be ultra portable so that they can go to other places. So actually the Corpus Christi court case exhibit got to go down to Raymondville to be on display at a library there. We also have an exhibit that recently closed on William Merriweather Pena, an architect who was from Laredo and spent most of his career in Houston. He was an Aggie and a World War II, highly decorated World War II hero. We're hoping to send that one to Laredo soon. So we're trying to send these things out because we make them ultra portable, they're able to go to communities that maybe don't have places dedicated to this topic, but they have some kind of space. So our goal is to help the public know more about this aspect of American history and to find inspiration from it.
Sarah Zenaida Gould is Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, MACRI. MACRI hosts its yearly symposium next weekend. When we come back, a symposium guest speaker from Minnesota says his experience during ICE's Operation Metro Surge will inform what he plans to discuss.
And mind you, I feel very privileged that I have these rights that many of our community members don't, and still was living in fear for my safety and the safety of my family and that of my neighbors.
Our conversation continues next on Fronteras.
Looking for an effortless way to support Texas Public Radio? Join your workplace giving program. Many companies like USAA, Liberty Mutual, and United Health Group provide workplace giving programs. Visit tpr.org/workplacegiving to get started today. Giving back has never been this accessible and impactful.
Welcome back to Fronteras. I'm Norma Martinez with Texas Public Radio in San Antonio. The Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, MACRI, is the nation's first museum and archive focused on Mexican American civil rights. MACRI's annual symposiums bring speakers from across the South Texas region and across the country to San Antonio to discuss contemporary civil rights issues. This year's MACRI Symposium is being held May 29th and 30th at Texas Public Radio in downtown San Antonio. The two-day conference features a stellar lineup that includes thought leaders who will discuss, among other topics, juvenile and criminal justice reform, the evolving racial and ethnic landscape of the U.S., and Latino representation in the arts. We're talking today with MACRI Executive Director Sarah Zenaida Gould, and we'll be joined shortly by one of the symposium speakers, Henry Jimenez. Jimenez is President and CEO of Minnesota-based Propel Nonprofits, an institution that offers access to capital to other nonprofits. Gould says she appreciates the similar missions of MACRI and Texas Public Radio in this symposium partnership.
First, may I just say I want to thank Texas Public Radio for partnering with us again this year. We did this last year, and it was such a great fit, I think, because Texas Public Radio is all about providing information to the public that's reliable and factual and that is free. And so it was just a great fit because that's what we're trying to do, too. So we're excited to come back to Texas Public Radio. We're especially excited because this year we are kicking things off on Friday night, Friday, May 29th, with Cristela Alonso. We've been trying to get her for a few years. She's a very busy woman, and she's somebody who, to me, represents this broader understanding of civil rights. So people probably know her from her TV show or from her stand-up comedy, and they might wonder, well, what does that have to do with civil rights? And I think she does such a beautiful job of not only being funny, she's funny, right, but also using her own life story and the challenges her family experienced as a mixed status family, as a family that they're immigrants and that experienced poverty, and her own personal experience of adjusting from that into now being a well-known personality and being able to pay for things. Being able to, I find her humor to be so touching and so powerful. And I'm very excited about having her kick things off. She won't be doing a comedy routine. She'll be talking about her life, her career, and how important it is to tell the kinds of stories that she tells on screens. And she will be joined by Congressman Joaquin Castro, who has made it a big issue in his platform of many different issues that he supports. But one of those is increased public visibility of Latinos. And so they'll be in conversation with a fireside chat on Friday night. Saturday, we have some really fantastic people. Of course, Henry, who you'll hear more from in a minute. We also have the current chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, who's Rochelle Garza, a native of South Texas. So she'll be talking about the state of Mexican-American civil rights. And then another one that I want to highlight is Mark Hugo Lopez. If any of you enjoy those Pew Center studies that come out periodically, Mark is one of the statisticians behind those studies. In fact, he's the director of the race and ethnicity research component at the Pew Center. And I'm always fascinated by those studies because they help us understand who are Latinos and how do Latinos see themselves and what are the issues that matter to Latinos. And they happen to have a new study just about to come out on U.S. Latinos. So he'll be talking about that. And I think for all the statistics wonks, you're going to really love it.
Well, Henry Jimenez, President and CEO of Propel Nonprofits, you've also been invited to participate in this symposium. What is maybe the focus of your conversation? Because as Sarah was talking about earlier in the program, civil rights is really all-encompassing, and it seems to me that your presentation may have sort of a more financial focus. Can you give us some perspective on what you may be talking about soon?
Yeah, Norma, perhaps maybe I could start by saying how this invitation even began, right? I actually happened to be in San Antonio a few months ago in the middle of Metro surge here in Minnesota. I was there because of my NALCAB board duties and happened to be in the same space as Sarah, where I was just speaking about the economic impact that Metro surge was having on our Latino community in the state of Minnesota, and also just the personal impact that it was having on me. And I know it's one of the top topics right now, I think, in our community and across the country, but to hear that perspective of that impact and maybe walking people through my everyday life, and mind you, I feel very privileged that I have these rights that many of our community members don't, and still was living in fear for my safety and the safety of my family and that of my neighbors. And so I think that the conversation is going to take a very organic approach from Nadej, who's the president of the San Antonio Foundation, who actually used to live in Minnesota and now obviously there in San Antonio. We're going to walk through just our love for not just San Antonio, but our love for Minnesota and the connections that we both have to these two places, and hope that maybe we could connect those emotions and those feelings to some that are very similar to what people might be experiencing here in San Antonio.
And you'd mentioned Nadej. That's Nadej Souvenir, CEO of the San Antonio Area Foundation. How are you now seeing how things have sort of cooled off, if you can say that that has happened there in Minnesota?
Well, everything eventually cools off here in Minnesota. As you can see, I'm joking here that this is part of my character. I think as Latinos, even in times of difficulty, we also need to laugh, right? We also need to humanize different parts of our everyday life. Unfortunately, I don't think everybody in our community feels like they can be laughing even at this point. I can tell you that it's starting to feel more normal, and that people are going back to work, that businesses are now open. And I just want to give you a quick glimpse, Norma, like things that we might take for granted, like going to our local, Mexican market or Salvadorian restaurant. For several months here, I would go in to try to support our community, or even just for me to indulge in my favorite food with my family, and the doors would be locked. I would have to maybe look through the window to see if I could see if anybody was inside. I think when maybe the owner or the person working inside of this establishment would maybe lock eyes with me and notice that, I'm a regular, then they would open the door. But this was the norm for several months. And as you can imagine, this probably cost a lot of sales to go down because folks were scared to go or would assume that these businesses were closed. And that's an area that I would like to explore with in this conversation, is not just the numbers, but the impact that has on community, and as well as the trauma that was imposed on our family, our children that were impacted by this. And we haven't even talked about education. Like my children both had classes that had about 22, 23 students in each class. And I could tell you that there was days that without me even asking my kids, they would say, Papa, today there was only 12 kids in my class. My daughter, I think, said there was 6 or 7 kids in her class on a daily basis because folks were not going to school because of the fear. Again, want to explore these because I think it's important, and I really appreciate MACRI to give me this opportunity. And I'm sure we'll do more of this, perhaps capturing more of the stories, the narrative from those impacted in not just Minnesota. And I know it's happening in different parts of the country, but this needs to be documented. We definitely need to remember this and address this in whatever way we can.
Yeah, Sarah, this is definitely a climate now that is just so much more politically charged. Voices of social justice often appear to be squashed here. And so this MACRI Symposium, I'm sure, is going to feature a lot of those voices who are going to be speaking out about the climate that we're in currently.
Right. And some people who have been following MACRI for a while may know that the vast majority of the year, our focus is history. I myself am a historian. We see history as something that people should know, that people should have access to, and that it helps bring clarity to the present moment. But from the get-go, people kept asking us, well, what about civil rights right now? And of course, that's absolutely relevant. So the symposium is our annual focus on what's happening right now. And we try to bring in people who are doing very relevant work right now. And so you'll be hearing from a variety of different perspectives about what work those individuals are doing, as well as what they're reflecting on in terms of what can be done to continue the work of civil rights. So you'll hear that from a number of different perspectives and a number of different professional backgrounds. That's the other thing, is we really want to communicate to folks that civil rights isn't only something that lawyers do. Civil rights happens across the board. If you're in the medical field, if you're in the financial field like Henry, and also if you're in the arts. So there's many ways that people intersect with civil rights. And for people who are watching, I hope you'll see there's many ways for you to be engaged.
Norma, if I may add, I just want to let you know that as someone that doesn't live in San Antonio, obviously I love Minnesota, but I have so much love for San Antonio as well. And I could tell you that these institutions like MACRI are so important because there's Latinos, Latinas from across the country, likely even the world, looking at the influence that is starting to be built, that is being documented, that we're learning from. I love the opportunity to be able to look at brown papers that are being created by our very own community. Some of these stories, like, again, for me to even be a part of this, it makes me feel seen, even if I may be coming from a community that doesn't necessarily have a MACRI in their community, right? And again, I've found my way to San Antonio because of the National Association of Latino Community Asset Builders, again, ALCAB, which was founded in San Antonio. There's just so much history in San Antonio, so much civil rights history here that it's definitely, I think, maybe the right place for an institution like this. And I could tell you that there's going to be more and more folks as they find out about MACRI, of the importance of MACRI. Don't be surprised if, Sarah has somebody from even outside of the United States someday at one of these symposiums.
Well, Henry Jimenez, Sarah Sanaida-Gul, it's been a pleasure speaking with you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Norma.
Thank you, Norma.
Sarah Sanaida-Gul is Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, MACRI. We also spoke with Henry Jimenez, President and CEO of Propel Nonprofits. Jimenez previously led the Latino Economic Development Center and sits on the board of NALCAB, the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. Jimenez is one of the guest speakers at next weekend's MACRI Symposium in partnership with Texas Public Radio in San Antonio. The symposium begins begins May 29th with a talk between comedian and actor Cristela Alonso and San Antonio Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro. Journalist Elaine Ayala will MC Day 2 of the symposium on May 30th, a day-long event with a variety of guest speakers. Find more details on this free, live, and virtual symposium at tpr.org. Fronteras editors are Dan Katz and Yvette Benavides. The program is produced by Marian Navarro and Norma Martinez. Charanga Cakewalk composed our theme music. Hear past episodes at tpr.org and on the Fronteras podcast. I'm Norma Martinez with Texas Public Radio in San Antonio. Thanks for listening.